at the Atlanta International Raceway, just moments away from the commands which will start 42 cars rolling toward the start of today's Atlanta 500 automobile race.
Tommy, you got your caution light on top of your truck, or one of them up there in the fourth turn. Turn it off. All right, Doyle, do it.
And now the command to start
Magic
engines.
Words we've long awaited, ladies and gentlemen. The product and marketing manager of Ford Parts and Service Division, the Grand Marshal today, Mr. Ken Myers.
Start your engines.
And so they do. 42 cars which will race today here in Atlanta in this 500-mile Grand National Stock Car Race. ABC Sports presents live from Atlanta International Raceway, the Atlanta 500. This ABC Sports exclusive is being brought to you by Bud Light. Everything else is just a light. By Valvoline Motor Oil, where motor oil is not just motor oil. And by Dodge, setting new standards of performance. And now 42 cars warm their engines and prepare for the pace laps, either 2 or 3, depending on the posture of the race cars as they come around, which will precede the official start, the green flag, for today's Atlanta 500 race. It is the 4th race in the early season circuit of Grand National Stock Car races, which represent this nation's most heavily attended automobile racing series. You can see the pace car at the front of the lineup, and you will now be introduced to the 2 cars which will carry ABC race cameras through today's race. Car number 29, occupied by the great Cale Yarborough, is just on the inside of the 2nd row toward the front of the pack, and Cale Yarborough will be seen via the ABC Sports race cam throughout today's 500-mile race. Our 2nd camera is mounted inside the car of number 75, Neil Bonnet. Bonnet finds himself toward the back of the pack after qualifying perhaps a little more slowly than he might have been accustomed to, and should offer an interesting view as he tries to make his way through the pack early in the race. Hello again, I'm Jim Lampley, and with me our ABC Sports automobile racing expert, Sam Posey. Sam, early in the season, this an important 500-mile race. Quickly, let's set it up.
Very important, and there are 2 overwhelming favorites. You have Dale Earnhardt starting from the pole, and alongside him, Bill Elliott. Now, it may be almost more like a prize fight than an automobile race. So intense is the rivalry between these guys. Dale Earnhardt, winner of 4 of the last 7 races, the defending national champion, a natural aggressor, a man who hunts deer in his spare time, likes to stalk his prey. Bill Elliott, quite by contrast, winner of the Daytona 500, is a man more known for his speed than for his infighting. They start, as I say, from the front row, Earnhardt in a Chevrolet, Elliott in a Ford. I can't wait. Looks like a real good one.
Elliott and Earnhardt between them account for victories in all 3 of the races which have been held so far this year. And as Sam Posey mentioned, they will start in row 1. Quickly now to orient you, Dale Earnhardt in car number 3, a qualifying record of over 175 miles per hour, breaking the previous Atlanta International Raceway record held by the man in car number 9, Bill Elliott. 2nd row, Cale Yarborough on the inside, again with our ABC race cam. On the outside of him, former Rookie of the Year and a hot shoe this year, number 90, Ken Schrader. Row 3, Buddy Baker on a long winless streak, but one of the best and most consistent drivers in the history of the sport. And outside of him, Ricky Rudd, number 15. Another former Rookie of the Year, number 27, Rusty Wallace on the inside of row 4. Outside of him, a great racing name, 2nd generation, Davey, son of Bobby Allison. In row 5, Terry Labonte and Benny Parsons. Row 6, Harry Gant and Lake Speed. Row 7, Bobby Hillen Jr. and last year's Daytona 500 champion, Jeff Bodine. Row 8, Bobby Allison and Michael Waltrip. Row 9, Richard Petty, winless since July 4, 1984. Outside of him, Ken Reagan. Row 10, Phil Parsons and Greg Sachs. And row 11 finds Darrell Waltrip qualifying much farther back than we would normally expect to see him. Sterling Marlin on the outside of him. Row 12, last year's Rookie of the Year, Alan Kulwicki. Outside of him, 52-year-old A.J. Foyt. Row 13, Kyle Petty and Neil Bonnet. Again, Bonnet with the ABC race cam mounted in his car. Row 14, Rick Wilson at Eddie Bierswale. Row 15, last year's champion Morgan Shepherd, number 26, and number 18, Tommy Ellis. Row 16, number 12, David Sosby, number 1, Ron Bouchard, and the rest of the field as they appear on the track for the start of today's race. And we have just been told that one car has been pushed off of the track, and I believe that it was car number 26, Morgan Shepherd, who after check it was not Shepherd, it was Eddie Bierswale. Eddie Bierswale has been pushed off the track, so there he is as his crew tries to pay attention to whatever problem it is in the pits. And the rest of the 41 cars still on the track make their way around turn 3 and toward turn 4 on what I believe to be the second pace lap. Now we look at the flag tower and no green flag is out yet. So there will apparently be one more pace lap as the pace car pulls into the pits.
No, there are 2 pace cars, Jim. There's still the second pace car out there, so the field speed is still being controlled by the pace car. We have word that the green will be waved the next time around.
Which gives us an opportunity, Sam, to set up the early part of the race, as car number 52 did not start the race. And that is the car belonging to Jimmy Means, who was back in row 17. So now Means joins Bierswale in the pits as they try to get in order to get back out on the track. And once again, you look at the field as they go down the back stretch, apparently headed toward a green flag this time around. Elliott on the outside, and on the inside, car number 3, Dale Earnhardt. Earnhardt unquestionably ranks at this moment as the top gun in Grand National stock car racing. But Sam, a lot of people expect that there's a possibility that Bill Elliott could repeat this year the kind of success he had 2 years ago in 1985 when he won a record 11 Grand National stock car races.
Yes, because except for the fact that Earnhardt is so skilled in the short tracks and the medium speed track, Elliott is rarely defeated when he runs fast on a super speedway like this. I see the pace car dive down, Jim, for the pit lane to start just moments away.
And because Elliott is from nearby Dawsonville, Georgia, this track, 30 miles south of Atlanta in Hampton, is regarded as his home course. So Earnhardt plunges toward the lead as they go into turn 1 on the very first lap of 328 circuits around this 1.522 mile track. It is Earnhardt on the inside as he pulls down the backstretch and now goes out high to take the lead ahead of Bill Elliott. Elliott holding on to second place in car number 9, and the field begins to stretch out behind them. Another car off the track, number 64, Connie Saylor. We are already down from 42 to 39 cars. They are about to complete the first lap, Earnhardt having established the lead. Elliott in second place. Car number 90, Ken Schrader, now occupying third, as Cale Yarborough has dropped back just a little bit.
You might wonder, how much does the lead really mean this early in a 500-mile race? The answer probably is not too much. It's a psychological thing. You do not want to be mired in the back of the pack. We see car number 83 coming into the pits. That's Lake Speed. Did so well at Daytona 2 years ago. I see him already putting the pace car out. There's a yellow flag, so we will see the leaders and the others slowing down. That is because of the Connie Saylor car, which is coasting to a stop outside of turn 2. You will start to see it in just a moment at the very bottom of your screen.
So they are on the third lap. After 2 green flag laps, the caution flag is out. First in the race. There will, of course, be several others to follow. Dale Earnhardt on the lead, Bill Elliott in second place, and we'll be back live right after this.
Big parade this year.
It's the economy.
We are back live at Atlanta International Raceway. Jim Lampley with Sam Posey in the booth as you see the cars continuing under the yellow caution flag. Work is going on in the pits. We have 2 pit reporters with us today. One is Dr. Jerry Punch, a legitimate MD from Bunnell, Florida, who also covers racing for ESPN and NASCAR's Motor Racing Network. The other is Jerry Gappens, assistant editor and publisher of one of the sport's major journals, National Speed Sport News. You will note that both carry the first name of Jerry, so we are going to refer to Dr. Jerry Punch as Dr. Punch. Let's go down to him right now.
Well, Jim, their problems early on in the race were Lake Speed. His Oldsmobile sitting behind me on pit road began to miss on the very first lap of the race. He radioed into his crew chief, Darrell Bride, said the car was very sluggish in turn 1. By the time he got back around, he was on 6 cylinders. You can hear the car behind me. It's missing horribly here on pit road. Tough luck for the Kannapolis, North Carolina driver.
All right, thank you, Dr. Punch. And in his reference to radioing back to the pit, Dr. Punch has touched on what I know you, Sam, believe to be one of the real critical elements in stock car racing.
It is the communication between the man in the car and the men plotting the strategy back in the pits, the chief mechanic and the people back in the pits. This is something relatively new to racing. Radios that really, really work well, an exchange of ideas between the man doing the combat out there in the car and the guys with somewhat cooler heads back in the pit. In many ways, that communication may become the story of the race. They are once again about to go green after that period of yellow flag laps. They're coming down toward the start-finish line now, Jim.
And they will go green for this, the beginning of lap 5 in the race. So once again, the blue and yellow car at the front is that of Dale Earnhardt, number 3, winner of the last 2 races on the circuit. Second place belongs to Bill Elliott. Third place, number 90, Ken Schrader. And fourth place, car number 29, that of the great Cale Yarborough. And Yarborough's car carries one of our ABC race cams. There's a look, Sam Posey, from Yarborough's point of view.
Yeah, you see him diving right now into turn 3. You can see what he sees if you look to the upper left of the screen. He'd be looking just ahead of the car that's immediately in front of him. He comes off the turn here, and as they go into turn 1, let me show you about where Cale is looking. He's looking under the mirror right in about there. That's his vision of the track. He's not concentrating on the car that's ahead of him, nor is he concentrating at all on the instruments down here. He'll glance at those, but only occasionally. This is what it looks like at about 185 miles an hour on the straight.
And now we're going to pan the camera around backwards so you can see the rear view picture from Cale Yarborough's car.
Yeah, what he cannot see is when a car comes up on his right, and it's especially right and behind him. It's especially blind coming off turn 4, and there is where you occasionally see cars get together here in Atlanta. A guy comes up blindly on another driver's right as they're leaving turn 4, and they rub sheet metal. There is Mr. Yarborough hard at work. I see from the angle that he's turning the wheel that at this point at least the car is riding extremely stably, but look at how much he's having to turn the wheel. That means the car is doing what we call pushing. The front of the car is sliding out more than the rear. It's a very stable condition for him, and probably as the track conditions change, Jim, during the race, that pushing condition may be ameliorated.
Connie Saylor, number 64, coming back into the pits after having briefly gone back out onto the race course. Obviously, Saylor continuing to have trouble. We call it the race cam. As you look at the 2 leaders, Earnhardt and Elliott, I should point out that it actually is a setup involving 2 cameras, one of which gives us the point of view of the driver and the other of which mounted on the passenger side of the car, or what would normally in your garage be the passenger side of the car, gives you a look at the driver as he works, and that was the second camera which showed us Yarborough turning the wheel. There are the 1 through 5 drivers at this moment: Earnhardt, Elliott, Ken Schrader, Cale Yarborough, and Ricky Rudd, lap 9 of 328. We've got a long way to go. And Sam, as we look at Yarborough's point of view, as we did a few moments ago, we should talk a little bit about this race course, which bills itself as stock car racing's only true oval super speedway. It is important to note that the turns are much longer than the straightaways. In fact, the vast majority of the time here is spent turning the wheel.
Yeah, the turns are a half a mile each, and the short straightaway is just a quarter of a mile. Notice how much Cale is turning the car. He's got that thing cranked way over, but it's also pretty stable. He's not having to control any slides. He flexes his hands a little bit there as you see him come back up onto the straight. The banks here, by the way, are 24 degrees, not quite as steep as Daytona, but steep enough to really contain the speed of the car. I mean, we think of an average speed of 170 miles an hour around an oval that's just a mile and a half long. It gives you some idea how much grip, how good the handling of the cars is in these bends where they're going about 162, 163 miles an hour.
And there was a time when some of the great old lions of the sport, notably Richard Petty, who's won 200 races in his career, would prefer what we call the high line on the track, keeping the car out near the outside wall as far around the circuit as possible. Here in Atlanta, and particularly in the newer group of drivers typified by Earnhardt, they want the low line down as close to the infield as possible.
True, and it's interesting, Petty right now is running a high line, but Earnhardt is, in a sense, making people come to him, people play his game. I notice Elliott is running a lower line than he usually does. Earnhardt came up through dirt track racing. His father was a dirt track guy. He knows how to handle a car in a slide at 150, 160 miles an hour. He feels perfectly comfortable. Look at how far, incidentally, the two leaders have stretched out. Earnhardt feels comfortable down very low like that, and when the track begins to get greasy and oily, and it will if there are blown engines during the day or the temperature heats up, Earnhardt is comfortable sliding the car around down there, and the Richard Childress team for which he drives has built special engines that give him power when he's sliding down there low on the turn. Other people build their engines to produce horsepower at the top end, a surge of speed at the end of the straight. That's a little more typical, say, of the Elliott family. So you've got a nice matchup here in different philosophies, different kinds of abilities of these two very, very fine drivers.
Has the difference in style and approach on Earnhardt's part and his comfort with looseness given him perhaps an undeserved reputation for recklessness?
No, I did for a while, but I think now Earnhardt's record, defending champion, winner of the 4 out of last 7, he is highly respected. Meantime, Dr. Punch is in the pits with a report. Jerry?
Lake speed. What's the problem with the car, Lake? What's the problem? I can't hear anything you're saying. One second. What's the problem with the car, Lake? We're not sure. There seems to be some kind of electrical problem that's just developed. You know, it gave us no indication whatsoever until when they dropped the green flag. The Wins Kmart car just sat there. I had to wave motion to the guys behind him to keep the traffic from running over me. But I'm not sure. It may be a problem internally in the distributor or something. There is a backup ignition system they are changing to. The crew trying to get Lake Speed back on the racetrack.
Thank you, Dr. Bunch. And of course, Lake definitely dropped the names of 2 of his major sponsors in that brief comment. They are sensitive racing machines, despite the fact that they look, at least in body shape, a great deal like the cars we could buy off the showroom floor.
But that is as far as it goes. They are pure racing machines. You see the leaderboard there with Earnhardt and Elliott substantially ahead of Ken Trader, Cale Yarborough, and Ricky Rudd. Rudd making a very good run here at a track which he's been successful before.
6 through 10, saw there briefly Davey Allison in 6th place, Buddy Baker in 7th place, as they begin to establish an early pecking order in what is going to be a long race. 500 miles. And at top speed, the cars will be traveling at somewhere between 165 to 170 miles per hour as they turn each lap. But during the course of the day, this race course will change. The cars will get a little bit slower, not perceptibly so on our screen, but certainly perceptibly slow to the drivers. And the ways in which they handled that particular progression will have a great deal to do with their success in the race. Next time around, incidentally, we're going to visit the race cam, which is mounted in the car of number 75, Neil Bonnet. Bonnet is currently running in 18th place. I mentioned before that we would get a chance to watch as he tries to pick his way through traffic. And look, right in front of him, there is Darrell Waltrip in his new car.
Straight, as you come off the 4th turn, every lap you need to glance at that flagman. Always look at the flagman, make sure we're still under green. You come on the flag stand, you're going down in the 1st turn, always look at the caution lights on the right side so you make sure there's not an accident over in the middle of the 2nd turn and you'll run up on it. You dive off right in the bottom of the racetrack, the car really jumps around. It's really physical getting the car turned. Come up off the 2nd turn on the back straightaway, you really sling out to the wall, let the car go where it wants to go. And the thing really eats the back straightaway up fast. You run up the back straightaway, quarter-mile straightaway. You go in 3, glance over at the caution light, look all the way to the left, look off the 4th turn to make sure there's no accident there. Dive right in the bottom of the racetrack. Come up off 4. Car really got to be pinched down because it wants to run out at the wall real hard right there. Let the car have its head, run right out against the wall, right down the front straightaway, up on the start-finish line, and just do it over about 300 times all.
Just do it over and over about 300 times. You note all of the elements of concentration and attention which are necessary for Bonnet to get around the racetrack. And he mentioned the physical difficulty of steering the car. We should point out that this is a racetrack on which all of the drivers use power steering. Some of them might qualify without power steering. They have to have it to accomplish what they need to accomplish to get around this course 328 times.
Yeah, notice that both Neil Bonnet and the car in front of him, which is being driven by Darrell Waltrip, you see Waltrip's car on the left, that very bright day-glow color, car number 17. Waltrip has finally got a car that is the sort of proper mirror of his personality. Darrell likes to stand out from the crowd, and he sure does on the track here. But both of those cars are sliding a good deal, in contrast to the way we saw Cale Yarborough's car performing a few minutes ago.
So we have finished 21 of 328 laps in the Atlanta 500, and Dale Earnhardt and Bill Elliott are still in command. We'll be back. Live at the Atlanta 500, still very early in the race with less than 50 miles having been completed, and you look at the leaderboard, which shows Earnhardt and Elliott ahead of Schrader, Ricky Rudd, and Cale Yarborough. 6 through 10, Buddy Baker, Benny Parsons, Davey Allison, Rusty Wallace, and Terry Labonte. So far, Earnhardt and Elliott have been far and away the fastest cars on the track. And Sam, we're going to get a chance right now to time a Dale Earnhardt lap, and it's worth noting that the drivers think not in terms of speed, but in terms of lap time.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, only the press really makes the conversion into speed at any track other than Indianapolis. You tend to think here in terms of not pushing your car faster, but shaving time off. Now let's time this lap of Earnhardt, who was the pole sitter, and we'll find out what he does now. Of course, the lap time won't be meaningful if he's held up by a back marker, but that car that he passed going into 1 didn't slow him up at all.
What is a good lap time? 32 seconds is about right, is it not?
Yeah, the pole went for 31.2. And hopefully, I mean, they've given us this great toy here, the stopwatch, and the thing we can draw pictures on the screen with. So let's watch as Earnhardt comes off the 4th turn. We'll get an idea early in the game. A 33.5 is 163. All right, he's 12 miles an hour right now off the pace that he qualified at. Now, what does that mean? That he's not trying hard? No, not at all. That the car is more conservatively geared, it's more conservatively set up, less likely to slide. You can hold on to a car that's sliding for a lap or two of qualifying. It's quite different when you're in a race and worried about the competition. Now let's see the interval here between Earnhardt, who we see there, and Elliott, 1.7 seconds. At this point, none of this, the intervals, where you stand, we saw Waltrip battling with oversteer, Neil Bonnet battling with oversteer. It's not too crucial because the race develops in stages. The only thing that could go wrong for a driver here would be if he fell back so far as to be lapped. But these men are just sorting out their car, communicating with their crew chiefs. They know that at their first pit stops, which are coming up, we see Lake Speed
headed
drawing into the garage, yeah. But the drivers all know that at the first pit stop, they can change their car significantly. A guy like Waltrip, who's running at this point relatively far back in the pack, and this is Darrell Waltrip's, exactly, his younger brother, who won a race here yesterday in a different category of car. Not so lucky today. But anyway, a Waltrip is not troubled at this point. Nor is an Elliott or an Earnhardt overconfident. Let's put it that way.
The key really is to stay on the same lap with the leaders because, frankly, the way NASCAR rules work, allowing cars to bunch up under the yellow flag, as long as you are on the same lap with the leader, you have a chance.
Yeah, don't bust your hump until you have one. That's what it comes down to.
There, incidentally, is car number 9. The Bill Elliott Ford, and there is the Bill Elliott Ford that you can buy at one of the numerous souvenir stands which ring this raceway. There's an enormous amount of money which is made on the day of every Grand National Stock Car race by the various vendors and concessionaires who surround the racetracks, and some of them are in trailers out in the parking lot outside the racetracks. They go from race to race, some of them selling only souvenirs which relate to one particular driver. There's a truck out there which has all Bill Elliott memorabilia. There's another which carries all Dale Earnhardt memorabilia. And there is the leader, Dale Earnhardt, as he continues to make his way around, having led every lap since the beginning of the race. The defending champion in Grand National Stock Car Racing. And earlier we asked Dale Earnhardt how winning, and winning so consistently, has affected the mental makeup of his racing team.
Confidence, man. There ain't nothing like confidence. I got the confidence in that race team it takes to win. I know no matter what happens, they can come back and be a winner. We came back from a bad wreck at Richmond on Saturday and won the race on Sunday, and I just thought that was impossible after seeing the race car tore as bad as it was. You know, they've had all kind of hard knocks, and they come back every time. That's the key to being a champion, is to, you know, jump them hurdles, work what it takes, and when it gets to
We've often pointed out, Sam Posey, that great baseball players don't often make good managers. By the same token, Dale Earnhardt's car is owned by a man named Richard Childress, who himself struggled as a race car driver and has now become, certainly at the moment, a spectacular success as a race car owner. Do you think that a man who struggles a little bit as a driver has perhaps a better handle on all of the complexities involved in a team? As you look at Buddy Baker coming into the pit, obviously bothered by some complexity of his own. But to follow the point up, do you think that perhaps a Richard Childress has a better chance of being a successful car owner than, for instance, Cale Yarborough, who is making the transition into being an owner this year?
Well, it's so hard to say. You've got Junior Johnson, who's perhaps over the last 10 years the premier car owner and was one of the greatest of drivers. So it's hard to say. I do think that no matter what, you have to have, as your car owner, as your crew chief, a man who understands the problems that the driver is having and listens to them sincerely, or else you're just not going to move toward the logical cures for the problems at hand.
Now you're looking at the 5th and 6th place cars in the race. On the left, the car of the phenomenally consistent Benny Parsons, and on the right, the car owned and driven by Cale Yarborough, number 29. And now we will enter Yarborough's car once again to watch as he follows Benny Parsons around the track.
All right, here he is diving down into that turn. Now, the whole inside of the Atlanta Speedway is hollowed out. It's lower than the typical grade outside of the track. So the driver, now look as he goes down into the turn. You can actually look across and see most of the turn that he's heading into. And a driver's eyes will glance over there really quickly so as to make sure that there isn't an accident on the track. I mean, you're going over 160 miles an hour, and in a turn in particular in these cars which weigh 3,500 pounds, it's not very easy to make sudden motion. So his eye view, if the mirror wasn't blocking it, is more over in here than just straight ahead. Notice also the amount that he's moving the wheel back and forth. It's a busy job out there. Because of the power steering, the effort is not great, but remember, the car is sliding or almost sliding at all moments. So every little motion he makes with the wheel is critical. He isn't just kind of bouncing along as it looks. If he were to move that wheel just a little bit differently in any one of these turns, it would mean a spin. I think the main thing is, I asked Darrell Waltrip the other day, what is the most misunderstood thing about the coverage of racing on television and just in the print media any old way? He said nobody really understands how difficult it is. And in some ways, getting inside the cockpit has been a big help. But in other ways, it may make it look easier than it really is. We're not feeling, for example, the G-forces that these cars are subjected to and which tires the driver so much. We've got a yellow, Jim.
Because of a blown engine, which was that of the car of number 30, Mike Waltrip. So Mike Waltrip will be out of the race, apparently with a blown engine. Mark Stahl preceded him into the pits and out of the race. Buddy Baker's car has still not re-entered the track, and we'll be back live right after this. Pit at around lap 60, all of the leaders elected to go on into the pits. So there are slightly different cars on the racetrack now for Dale Earnhardt and Bill Elliott and the other leaders in the race. Meanwhile, we mentioned that Buddy Baker had a long sojourn in the pits. It's been 78 races since Baker scored a stock car racing win, and he may be headed for more trouble today. And let's go down to Dr. Jerry Punch to hear exactly what's wrong.
Well, Buddy Baker had an unscheduled stop. The two-time winner here at Atlanta brought his car in 2 laps before the yellow flag came out. He indeed had a miss in the car. They think they may have dropped a valve, lost a cylinder. He will try to finish the race today, but he'll be running at a disadvantage on only 7 cylinders.
Elzie Wiley Baker Jr., Buddy Baker, son of one of the great names in the early days of the sport, Buck Baker. And meanwhile, the hot dog business heats up just outside the racetrack as the yellow flag continues on the course. And our other pit reporter we mentioned is the assistant editor and publisher of National Speed Sport News, Jerry Gappens. Let's go to him right now.
Here are the tires that just came off a leader, Dale Earnhardt's car. 4 new tires on. Richard Childress, the owner of the team, said the car looked fine, it's handling fine, and the tires look very good. These tires, however, will not go back on the car. Each pit stop today, they'll put a fresh set on. Each tire, $179 to purchase. A set for almost $700 for 4. They'll go through 10 sets today if they go through all 500 miles. A tire bill today of $7,000. Now, if you win the race, Goodyear will give you these tires free. If you finish second or back, you have to pay for them. So it's another incentive to win here at Atlanta today.
All right, thank you very much, Jerry Gappens. You see Buddy Baker's car being pushed out of the pits. Maybe he won't get a chance to finish today's race. And meanwhile, they go green now as the cars come back down the front straight. Green flag out, new tires on the leaders. That's a story in itself, Sam.
It is, and if you're looking at Earnhardt here, you'll see him literally overwhelming some of the cars that were down on the inside. Those are the cars that have been lapped. You see that despite the shuffle in the pits, 4 tires changed by both the leaders. They have re-established their supremacy. It'll be very interesting to see right off the bat if their 2 cars and Cale Yarborough's cars and the other in contention continue to handle roughly the same way they did up until that first pit stop. You know, Jerry Gappens made the point that the tires that have been taken off the Cale Yarborough car would not be put back on, despite the fact they've been run only about 55, 60 miles. The reason, in the old days, you took if you had a setup that was good, the tires felt good on the car, and you hadn't gotten too many miles on them, sometimes you took them off and you saved them in the back of the pits and you put them on again for that dash to the finish in the last few laps. But lately the strategists say, no, it's better. They measured the tires so carefully. They know so much about it. There's Kenny Schrader in 3rd place, just ahead of Cale Yarborough. So now they go for the advantage of the absolutely fresh tire. And a tire that's run only 40 or 50 miles has done its job for the day.
Ken Schrader in 3rd place, worth some discussion, 31 years old, Rookie of the Year 2 years ago. In fact, Schrader is from Benton, Missouri, and I think it's fascinating that 5 of the past 6 NASCAR Rookies of the Year have come from outside the Southeast, as the sport is becoming progressively more national with each passing year.
Well, you know, that is so true, and there are many fundamental changes that are going on in this sport right now. For example, the ages of many of these men, I mean, most of them are in their 30s, but listen to some of the drivers that are in their 40s. Waldron, Yarborough, Gant, Parsons, Petty, Allison, Baker, all in their 40s, due to retire not that long away from now. So the face of NASCAR racing is going to change. People coming in from different parts of the country, new blood coming in. The cars themselves, Jim, are much different than they were a few years ago. They're lighter, they handle far better, they make much more use of aerodynamics. They're far more sophisticated. I mean, all the front-running teams have liaison with the major Detroit manufacturers. They test in wind tunnels. This is not the sport that it was 15 years ago. And it says to me a lot, incidentally, about Richard Petty, who was a champion 15 years ago, that he stuck with it all through these years and is still competitive today.
Petty, like Parsons and Buddy Baker, is in his late 40s. A.J. Foyt racing at 52 is certainly an anomaly and not the rule. Darrell Waltrip is only 40 years old, but claimed to us earlier this year in an interview at Daytona Beach that he hoped to retire by age 45, and then in the same sentence said, but don't hold me to it.
Exactly. I think sometimes Darrell, who talks a great deal and incidentally talks a blue streak over the radio all through the race, likes to hear what he says, and then he decides whether maybe that's what he believes or not.
Now there is Neil Bonnet as he dices with Darrell Waltrip. Bonnet at the moment in 17th place, so Waltrip also still biding his time after struggling to qualify. He had to make 2 qualifying runs to get into the field, and that's certainly an unusual experience for Waltrip, who's in a bit of a stage of transition this year. So for that matter is Bonnet, racing with a new team after having spent years with the Junior Johnson organization prior to his departure at the end of last season.
Well, they both raced with Junior Johnson last year. That's the interesting thing. And both these men, now back in the pack, dueling it out, are with brand new teams. Neil Bonnet with a team, the Raymock team that he drove 4 years ago and has come back to kind of a homecoming, and Waltrip with a new team that he's created on his own. They're having a good battle, and although we haven't had a good look at Neil Bonnet's hands on the wheel, we probably will have a look at that soon. Waltrip's car, as a result of changes they made during the pit stop, is a good deal more stable. I'm not sure about Neil's Bonnet's car is still what we call oversteering, or it's a little bit loose, but it looks more stable to me. You see him turning slightly to the right, incidentally, on the straight. Even the straights here are not dead flat. I'd say Bonnet has improved his car significantly, Jim, in that pit stop. Notice there's much less circumferential movement of the wheel required by Bonnet now than before. He has completed that pass of Waltrip and is now sighting Harry Gant in that green and white car you see right there.
Actually, it's Waltrip who moved ahead on the outside line. Bonnet is one of those who wants to adhere as tightly as possible to an inside line on this racetrack. He calls it a wrestling match, and you see him there going back down toward the bottom of the track.
Actually, I blew that completely. Waltrip definitely got the better of Bonnet on that. He went high. Reminds me, I know.
There goes Harry Gant.
Yeah, there's Gant. I know, Jim, you and I, both having children of roughly the same age, have played a good deal of chutes and ladders in our time. And when you're involved in traffic like this, it's the sort of thing that can happen. You think you're going great, and you're setting up to pass a guy, and then all of a sudden, you turn out to be in the slow lane, and 5 guys go by you on the outside. I'd say right now, what we're looking at is an average speed of 163, 64, top speed of 175. In the turns, though, in this dense traffic, high 150s, 159, 160.
A great deal of air turbulence surrounding the cars, drafting the practice which has been so typical in NASCAR racing over the years and which became known to the general public as a result of the behavior of these kinds of race cars is not nearly as feasible a tactic now as it might have been 5, 6, 7 years ago because the cars are so much more aerodynamic. Is that not true?
That is true. The art of drafting hasn't died out, but it's a finer art now. It's not as easy to get sucked along by a car. These cars are much smaller. They're cleaner. The airflow over them is much cleaner than it ever was before. Well, once again, we saw Neil Bonnet really struggling there briefly with the car, and that car is not as stable as I think he'd like it.
Well, it's going to be 79 races in a row in the illustrious career of Buddy Baker without a victory. And he's a gentleman who is always quite congenial after victory or after defeat. Right now, Buddy Baker, out of the races, standing by with Dr. Jerry Punch. Dr. Punch?
Well, Buddy, one of the early race favorites here in Atlanta, but you had to park it. What happened?
Well, I couldn't hear you. I'm going to just answer what I think happened. I think we dropped the valve or something because the car was running real good. We started moving up good. I called Cale and we're moving on up. I think we were back up in 4th or 5th, and it just started a dead skip, and I really don't know what it is. I hate it for everybody from Crisco because we thought we had a real good chance to run up front all day, and it just didn't work that way.
Well, that's Buddy Baker, very disappointed. He had a great run at Daytona, finishing 4th, but he has a short day here in Atlanta.
A short day for a tall man, 6'5" 215-pound Buddy Baker. We'll pack it in and watch the rest of the race. And there are the 2 leaders on the screen, Dale Earnhardt and Bill Elliott. You get the feeling, Sam, just toying with each other and feeling each other out in this early stage of the race. I say stage. We mentioned that the pit stops come at intervals of between 60 and 65 laps, so there are at least 5 of them during the course of the race. And that means that a man might drive what amounts to, in a subtle way, 6 different cars through the course of the day.
Oh, I wouldn't say in a subtle way. It could be markedly different one to another. Incidentally, it's neat that the battle for the lead is heating up a little bit. Elliott is running close enough to Earnhardt right now to get plenty of aerodynamic buffeting and interference. In other words, he is making a point here to Earnhardt, if Earnhardt cares, let's put it that way, that yes, he can run with him. And you know, when you're racing in front of your home crowd, never discount emotional factors. Elliott doesn't want to show himself to be being blown off by Dale Earnhardt. However unimportant it would be at this stage of the race, you want to show those home folks that you can do it. You can stay with the guy that in some ways is being called the hottest hand in racing today.
Of course, cars themselves show no emotions, although people show emotions about them. Bill Elliott's car is a Ford, and he is so prominent, and his use of Ford machinery so well known that he is veritably wrapped in the corporate insignia of Ford at this stage of his career. Dale Earnhardt's car is a Chevrolet, and this despite the fact that many of the drivers commented at Daytona Beach earlier this year that they felt that Ford was perhaps a little bit more advanced, particularly in its approach to the aerodynamics of this sport.
Yeah, but in the aerodynamic issue, it's probably more on the very, very fastest of tracks. You see Elliott making that high line start to work. We're seeing a very characteristic racing situation as they come off that fourth turn, almost brushing the wall. I would say this is the beginning of a bid by Elliott. You can certainly see the crowd reaction, Jim. I mean, they've known that Elliott was hanging back there. Now they see that their man, so to speak, and he's a very big favorite here, can carry the attack to Dale Earnhardt. What I was going to say is, I don't think, in some ways, the aerodynamics in terms of the amount of aerodynamic drag that a car has, that's the drag that will affect its top speed, is a very big factor here in Atlanta. What is a much bigger factor is the amount of downforce that a car's body can give it. And I think you saw the crowd there beginning to standing up and reacting to this battle. I think that the Chevrolet is a good match at this stage for the Ford in terms of overall downforce.
100 miles into a 500-mile race, and the Georgia crowd on its feet as they watch their man, Bill Elliott, stalking Dale Earnhardt of Kannapolis, North Carolina. We are now going to take a brief look at the battle for 5th and 6th. On the inside, on the right-hand side of your screen, that is Terry Labonte, and the man to the outside of him, Rusty Wallace. Both among the hot young bloods in the sport. Labonte a bit more established. He won the overall Grand National Championship a couple of years back.
I talked a moment ago about how much Darrell Waltrip talks in his radio during the race. Labonte has taken over his seat on the Junior Johnson team, and by contrast, the Junior Johnson men tell me that Labonte never says anything. He's absolutely silent.
Well, we've stationed our 2 pit reporters at opposite ends of the pit to cover the whole field, and so far, just by luck of the draw, the action is taking place on Dr. Jerry Punch's side of the line. So let's go right back down to the doctor right now. Meanwhile, out on the track, before we go to see Dr. Jerry Punch, there is car number 19, piloted by Derek Cope, which you saw briefly touch the outside wall, then rebound onto the inside wall, and the caution flag is out once again. We're going to take another look at what happened to Derek Cope about 100 miles into the Atlanta 500. And there he is down on the apron, Sam.
All right, you see him. It's pretty clear. At this point, he is completely out of control, headed for the wall. We did not see what triggered his accident. Now he's headed probably still at 20 or 30 miles an hour at least. But such is the construction of these cars that they can take a hit like that, absorbing, as I think you saw it do, the impact. And probably, with my fingers crossed here, I'm predicting that the driver is probably okay.
Elaborate racing roll cages. Certainly there are no safer vehicles in big-time automobile racing than Grand National stock cars.
Boy, is that right. I mean, they are just in a league by themselves, and any of the drivers that you talk to realize there's a substantial difference between being a Grand National driver and, say, a Formula One driver at Monaco. You see the leaders all coming in now, although it is only 25 laps since the last yellow, and there is no need whatsoever for them to be here for fuel, obviously. It's just, once again, to improve the handling of the car, and it looks as if Derek is just fine.
Well, you wonder why Bill Elliott would change a thing, as well as his car was running, and with perhaps another 40 laps to go before he would have to pit. But both Earnhardt and Elliott and the rest of the leaders are all in the pits right now under the caution flag. 64 laps down, 264 to go, and we'll be back. As we return live with the caution flag still out at the Atlanta 500, you can see that we have a new leader, number 27, Rusty Wallace. And Sam, there's a very good reason for that.
He didn't pit. The other leaders did pit, but it was a strategic decision by Wallace, whose car was probably handling very well, to get a little glory, get a few points and a little extra money for staying out there.
All right, now Dr. Punch is standing by in the pits with another driver who's out of the race, Greg Sachs, and let's go to him now.
Greg, a short afternoon for you. What happened?
Well, you know, I'm awful disappointed. We had that Valvoline Pontiac really running good. It appears we must have dropped a valve during there, and big disappointment. Just like to say hi to Brian Paul and Rachel. We'll see you tonight.
This driver poured the biggest upset in NASCAR history back in 1985 at Daytona. He won in an unsponsored car with a makeshift crew, but he wasn't so fortunate here today.
All right, thank you very much, Jerry.
Have you noticed, Jim, that each driver that our men in the pits has interviewed so far have mentioned in their third or fourth word the sponsor of their car?
They're rather well trained.
You called attention to that, but it is really overwhelming here in this world of NASCAR racing now, how much these men are spokesmen for their sponsors.
Well, and that touches on a point which many of the drivers spoke to us about this week, which is that there was a time when it was sufficient for a driver to be a good race car driver, and that simply isn't enough now.
In fact, you kind of wanted to be gruff and grumbly, didn't you? You know what I mean? A guy who might be fast with his fists and not a good guy who'd pump a sponsor up.
Out of the race so far, Lake Speed, Michael Waltrip, Buddy Baker, Derek Cope, and Greg Sachs. So at least one car which might have been given at least an outside shot at contending for a top position or maybe even winning the race, that of Buddy Baker, has gone down along with several others.
Okay, of course, I said that they didn't need fuel. By that, when they pitted just now, by that I mean they weren't about to run out, but it is strategically advantageous to stop each and every time and top up with fuel. Now, Jerry Gappens has a story for us in the pit. Jerry?
We're with Barry Dobson, a crew chief for Rusty Wallace's car. Barry, a little bit of different pit strategy from the other people. Why'd you stay out?
We didn't stay out. We stopped and got 4 tires. The Kodiak Pontiac's running very well. They started this thing at 2 o'clock, so we're ready to go home.
Rusty's saying anything about the track conditions?
Yeah, the car's a little tight right now. This place usually loosens up. We're working with tire stacker and bite, trying to catch up with it.
Okay, Barry Dotson reports on Rusty Wallace's condition out on the track.
And thank you, Jerry Gappens. We apologize for throwing you the curveball on Rusty Wallace's strategy. It didn't appear to us that he had gone into the pits, but Sam, obviously he got in and out so fast that we weren't able to catch him. And there goes the Derek Cope car, which is leaving the race.
Well, you know, the history of this form of racing is littered with problems the scorers have, not catching somebody pitting or crediting them with an extra lap or something, and you can see why. I mean, I'm not trying to get us off the hook. We blew it, but
though I appreciate the effort.
Right. But when everyone does come in and you've got 40-odd cars pitting, it does get chaotic. And it's easy to have sympathy for the errors of that kind that are made here.
In fact, there have been numerous disputes after races in NASCAR racing having to do with precisely that issue. Lap count. It is often questioned, and even in this day of computerized scoring in automobile racing, it remains something quite difficult for stock car racing officials to do. Now let's listen for a while as Rusty Wallace talks about the degree to which established drivers, big names in the sport, made him feel good by accepting him and accepting his newfound prominence as a stock car racer.
People like Cale Yarborough, Buddy Baker, Bobby Allison, drivers like that. When I go to Daytona, it used to be when I first showed up, you know, those guys don't even let me near them. And now they're lined up behind me to go draft with them. And there's car owners coming over to ask me to drive for them in 1987 or 1988. I'm all locked up with my deal. I'm not even thinking about it. But, you know, those people do come up and they ask those questions. It makes you feel good. I'm the new kid on the block. I'm the younger generation. I'm coming up. They're going to be car owners, and they're looking for people like us to do what they're doing. I feel like I'm very well accepted. I respect those people. I've learned an awful lot from them, and I'm never ever going to knock them. I'll tell you that.
Rusty Wallace is 30 years old. He was Rookie of the Year on this circuit in 1984. He is from Fenton, Missouri, as is the 1985 Rookie of the Year, Ken Schrader. Wallace has since moved from Fenton, Missouri to North Carolina to be closer to the heartbeat of the sport, but he has done well and finished third in the last race on the circuit at Richmond, Virginia.
You know, having that pit stop by Rusty Wallace and getting back out in the lead, think of what that does for your crew. See, the crew is very much a part of the race here, after all, for the seconds that the car is in the pits, never mind all the strategic decisions made by the crew. In this case, they showed that they could service that car faster than the Elliott men, faster than Earnhardt's men, at least this time out. And I think that gives them a burst of confidence. I'm sure it gives Rusty Wallace a sense of confidence that the men back waiting for him when he stops are going to get their job done right.
The car on the inside there, number 62, Steve Christman, has been lapped, as has the car just behind him, number 77, Ken Reagan. The cars which are on the lead lap are those on the outside of the formation. Wallace in first place. He's led for 5 laps now. Behind him, Dale Earnhardt, and then Bobby Hillin Jr., Bill Elliott now with a car between his car and that of Earnhardt. And you see the rest, and there's the king, Richard Petty, number 43, winless since July 4, 1984, when he won his record 200th NASCAR race, the Firecracker 400 in Daytona Beach, Florida. They go green, and Wallace now tries to hold his position in front of Dale Earnhardt.
Wallace has some very good memories of this track. He ran here as a rookie with the Roger Penske team and finished second. But it looks as if Earnhardt, who just is so strong when he runs that car low on the track, you might call it downstairs. Upstairs would be a high line. Wallace somewhere in the middle right now. But look at Earnhardt right on that line, down inside. His car handling well there, and then accelerating strongly off the turn. Interesting you mentioned Richard Petty, who's running very well right now. He has been winless for a while, but he was 3rd in the Daytona 500 a month ago, which is really a marvelous finish for a man of his age at this stage in his career. And he may yet win another race. I think you can count him out. By the way, look at that giant gap pulled out by Earnhardt in just a lap.
34-year-old Dale Earnhardt on the lead. Right now, let's go down to Jerry Gappens, who'll bring us up to date on Derek Cope's crash.
Derek Cope, the first major incident of the day. What happened?
Well, we had a problem in the 3rd turn down there. The car felt real good, starting to work the push out, and I was watching Darrell in front of me, and I could see some smoke, and all of a sudden the car come up from underneath me like we hit some water or oil, and there's nothing we could do, but you know, I don't know exactly what we hit, but something for sure.
You're a rookie, Derek, on this circuit, but you're a veteran out in the West Coast. Did inexperience have anything to do with it?
Well, I don't think so. You know, the Tri-Pack 4 was running real good. The push was coming out of the car, and I felt like I started to catch Darrell and Davey, and you know, all of a sudden there was something I hit because the car came out from underneath me without, you know, no cause at all. So it's just something that happened.
Okay, Derek Cope okay, but out of the race.
Got the sponsorship pop in so fast,
Yeah.
I'm not sure it had full impact.
Yeah, Bill Elliott has now moved past Rusty Wallace into second, so we have resumed the order that we've had throughout. And incidentally, really, Jerry Gappens, interesting there. He really almost impugned Cope for a second there, you know? I mean, he
Did
said,
inexperience
have anything to do with it? There have been times when I've wanted to ask that and haven't had the nerve.
Well, so we can't fault Jerry Gappens for nerve. He's already outstripped us on that score. Good job. And you look at Dale Earnhardt, still on the lead, and now once again being chased by car number 9, Bill Elliott. We are in the second 100-mile section of this 500-mile race, and in the pits, the owner of Dale Earnhardt's front-running car, Richard Childress, stands by now with Dr. Jerry Punch. Doctor?
Richard, are you concerned a little bit about the pace that Dale's been setting early on, or have you thought about telling him to pull the reins in and save the car a little bit?
No, I asked him early kind of what RPMs he was turning, and he told me, and he said it wasn't abusing the car right there, so he's just gonna go ahead and run it right there.
It seems like this team is almost bulletproof. Last week at Richmond, the car came apart, and Saturday in a practice session, you rebuilt the car overnight, and you had momentum on your side. You came back and won the next day. Do you feel like this has got to be your year?
Well, you know, we're just doing it, taking it one race at a time, doing the best we can.
That's Richard Childress, the car owner for Dale Earnhardt.
All right, thank you, Doctor. And Sam, all of us who have tachometers on our car are familiar with RPMs. What RPMs is he likely to be turning?
8,000 roughly at the end of the straight, and probably about 1,300 less than that, say 6,700 in the turns.
And that compares, for instance, with a Formula One Grand Prix car, which would be
about 11,000.
All right, we'll be back with more exclusive coverage of the Atlanta 500 after this commercial message and a word from our local stations. First the commercial, then the station break. This ABC Sports exclusive, the Atlanta 500, is being brought to you by Monroe Shock Absorbers. For shocks and struts, America rides Monroe. By Vicks Sinex. With Sinex, you feel better in seconds. Plus, it keeps you breathing for hours. And by Quaker State Motor Oil. Quaker State, people, reaching for the best. Leaders now after 82 laps. exactly 1/4 of the Atlanta 500. Dale Earnhardt on the lead. Bill Elliott in second place. They have been in those positions through most of the race. Rusty Wallace third, Terry Labonte fourth. Ken Schrader has remained in the top 5 since the very beginning of the race. Richard Petty sixth, Ricky Rudd, Kyle Petty, Bill Parsons, and Jeff Bodine. On the lead, the yellow and blue car is the Chevrolet of Dale Earnhardt. On the far right-hand side of the screen, as we widen out, you can see the car chasing him in second place, number 9, the Ford of Bill Elliott.
Now, the track, if we could express it as having a kind of, or describe it as having a kind of personality, which changes during the day. At first, of course, and you see Cale Yarborough there, he has dropped back somewhat into the pack. You see him running with that distinctive car of Darrell Waltrip's just on the left of your screen now. We have Dr. Punch with Jake Elder, who is the crew chief on Cale Yarborough's car. Doctor?
Well, they have a problem on Cale Yarborough's car. You mentioned the car dropping back. This is the man right here that has to diagnose the problem. That's Jake Elder, the crew chief. And Jake talking to Cale when they come by this time. He's been watching the car from back here at the fence as it makes lap after lap. And Jake, what is the problem with the car? Did you get a mismatched set of tires?
Well, we made that pit stop a while ago. We had a wheel wasn't tight. We had to come back in. He got all behind that traffic. Now I think we got the stagger messed up a little bit right now. He's a little bit too tight.
Well, the stagger is the difference in circumference between the rear tires and the front tires. This is the man right here that crewed Morgan Shepherd to victory in this race a year ago. Today, he is behind the pit wall for Cale Yarborough.
And working for a brand new racing team, and now we visit the inside of the office of that racing team to watch Cale Yarborough work.
Well, let's see how much he is working, and if we can get a feeling for the way he's working the wheel as to the way the car might be handling. Now, he's turning the wheel well over, about the same way he was at the outset of the race when it was, oh, look at that, look at that. What's going on there? Cale in trouble. There's no doubt about it. He was overworked there for a split second. Let's hope he's okay. You saw a man lose control of his car. We weren't looking out the front to know what triggered it, whether it just plain got away from him, but that, Jim Lampley, is a unique moment, I might say.
A remarkable escape by Cale Yarborough. You see him gunning it back into turn 3 as he heads on around the racetrack. Number 71 down on the apron was Dave Marcus. He appeared to be one of the cars which had spun. It's hard to tell who caused the conflagration. Harry Gant's car is stalled in the middle of the backstretch. And there is a look at Gant's car as it is.
That isn't Harry in there still, is it? I don't know. They usually, in getting out of the car, remove the netting. I don't see it removed. Could that be Harry's helmet? Let's not speculate. But yes, it is.
Yeah,
isn't
he's
it?
moving around. You can see him moving his hand.
But he obviously was, at the very least, dazed heavily by that blow. Cale Yarborough, I think there was a crash in front of Cale, and he was maneuvering to avoid it. He spun in the process. What an amazing piece of driving. Part genius, part luck. I think a little bit of Danny Sullivan maybe alive in Cale right at this point.
Did he flatten the rear left tire, Sam? It looks to me as though that tire is a little low.
Does it?
I'm not sure.
Doubtless he flat spotted the tires. When you slide sideways, you wear them down flat. The car probably feels right now as if it's running over the ties of a railroad track.
Well, he obviously didn't flatten it because he's staying out on the racetrack and has not come into the pit.
No, but there's going to be a protracted yellow here, Jim. So he may stay for a couple of laps. We'll see him pit for sure during this yellow.
All right, now let's go back to Harry Gant. You can see now that officials are on the scene working to free him from the wreckage of what was moments ago car number 33.
Immensely popular driver, Harry Gant, who of course we saw from the camera-mounted car of Neil Bonnet earlier. All right, we're going to see what came on us so suddenly. We're going to see again Cale obviously turning hard there in the second turn. Look at him turning it hard to the right, back to the left. Can we get any hint of whether he's spinning? I think he's coming out of the spin now. And he obviously looks to the right, which was to see Gant. So Cale was actually well down on the inside of the track toward the end of that maneuver, because he looked to his right to see Gant, who was down on the inside of the track. There is Cale, obviously, right there, fighting a big slide. Cale is pitting now, incidentally. Now,
just missed the rear end of Waltrip's car.
Yeah, he fought the slide, but he couldn't hold on to it, which surprises me. So there's the second point. Now,
all right, you saw a car sliding sideways on the outside of the track. You saw him go by car 71 of Dave Marcus on the inside.
We
Here's
saw
another look.
Parsons going slowly on the left of our screen there. All right, there is the impact by Kulwicki, the Rookie of the Year. Perhaps he is the man that triggered it. That's Parsons' car on the left.
That's Marcus, 71. So Kulwicki was involved.
How many cars are we adding up? 6, 7 right now?
At least 4, and seemingly more than that. We know that Gant was involved. We know that Kulwicki was involved. We know that Parsons was involved. And car number 1, which belongs to Ron Bouchard, was also involved.
And we know that Harry Gant, all is not well there. We also saw an exceptional bit of work by Cale Yarborough. All right, now let's see Neil Bonnet's view of the same incident. You see those bars, incidentally, they keep the windshield, if it breaks, from caving into the cockpit. I don't see much of anything. I hope Neil could see more than I can. That's the smoke, evidently, and haze from the spin of the cars in front. He spun, obviously.